I showed up to my own daughter's wedding dressed like a homeless man. Torn jacket, dirty boots, hair uncombed, and the way she looked at me when she realized who I was, it split my life clean in two. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. And before you decide I've finally lost my mind, let me tell you something straight. I didn't do it for attention, and I sure didn't do it to ruin her day. I did it because I needed to know the truth. And once you hear what led me there, you'll understand why I had no other choice. Before I get into this, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if stories like mine hit you where it hurts, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Helps Uncle Mickle keep bringing you the truth nobody else wants to talk about. Now let me pull you back to where this all began. It was a bright Saturday morning in late spring, the kind that makes you believe everything's going to turn out all right. The wedding was being held at a vineyard just outside town. White chairs lined up neat as soldiers, strings of lights hanging from oak trees, soft music floating through the air like it had nowhere better to be. Families were arriving in pressed suits and pastel dresses, laughter bouncing off the gravel paths. And there I was, sitting on a low stone wall across the road, holding a paper cup with a few coins rattling at the bottom. Nobody knew it was me. I watched them arrive one by one. Her friends, her mother's side of the family, the groom's parents, smiling wide, shaking hands like they owned the place. Nobody spared me more than a quick glance. Most didn't look at all. To them, I was just another inconvenience near a beautiful moment, something to be ignored. I don't blame them for that. I planned it that way. Under that frayed coat and that week-old beard was a man who had worked 30 years without missing a paycheck. A man who paid for piano lessons, college tuition, braces, first cars. A man who sat through dance recitals and parent-teacher meetings and late-night phone calls that started with, "Dad, I messed up." A man who thought he knew his daughter. As guests passed, I kept my head down. I listened. People talk freely when they think you don't matter. I heard comments about the decorations, the food, the groom's career. I even heard someone complain that the venue should have cleared out the riffraff. That one stung more than I expected. Then the music shifted. A hush rolled over the crowd, like a held breath. Everyone stood. She stepped out. My little girl, Sarah, in a white dress that fit her like it was sewn from hope itself. Hair pinned just the way she used to wear it for church on Easter mornings. For a second, I forgot the dirt on my hands and the ache in my knees. All I saw was the baby I used to hold at 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep. She looked radiant. She looked happy. And then she saw me. Her eyes met mine from across the road, just for a heartbeat. I saw confusion flicker first, then recognition, then something else, something sharp and fast, like fear mixed with embarrassment. She didn't smile. She looked away. That moment right there, that's when I knew this story wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped. And as I pushed myself up from that stone wall, feeling every year of my life settle into my bones, I realized I was about to find out exactly where I stood in my daughter's world, whether I was family or just something to be hidden. Before that morning at the vineyard, my life had a rhythm to it. Nothing flashy, nothing fragile either, just steady. The kind of steady you trust without thinking too hard about it. I raised Sarah mostly on my own after her mother, Linda, and I split when Sarah was 10. No scandal there, just two people who realized too late they wanted different lives. Linda moved 2 states away, started fresh. I stayed. Same house, same job at the utilities company, same grocery store clerk who knew my name and my usual loaf of bread. Sarah grew up in that house with me. Yellow paint in her bedroom because she said it made her feel sunny. A dog-eared couch where we watched Friday night movies. Mornings where I burned the toast and she laughed like it was part of the routine. I wasn't perfect. I worked long hours, missed a few school plays I still regret, but I was there when it counted. I showed up. Every time she fell, every time she needed a ride, every time the world scared her more than she wanted to admit. We talked. Maybe not about everything, but enough. She told me about boys she liked, about fights with friends, about dreams that changed every year. Teacher, photographer, travel blogger, wedding planner. I listened. Sometimes I advised. Sometimes I just nodded and let her talk until the knot in her chest loosened. When she went off to college, the house got quiet in a way that never really goes away. I adjusted, learned to cook smaller portions, left her room mostly untouched, like a promise waiting to be kept. We spoke every Sunday night. Same time, same easy rhythm. So when she called one evening and said, "Dad, I met someone," I smiled without hesitation. His name was Michael. She told me he was ambitious, clean-cut, good family, worked in finance, spoke about the future like it was already mapped out. I didn't meet him right away. Schedules didn't line up, but I heard about him enough to feel like I already knew the man, or at least the version she wanted me to know. The engagement came faster than I expected. She sounded breathless on the phone, words tumbling over each other. I congratulated her, meant it, told her I was proud, and I was. I offered to help with the wedding, not control it, just help. She hesitated, just a fraction too long, before saying they had most of it covered. Michael's parents were really involved. She laughed when she said it, but the laugh didn't quite land. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They build lives that don't center around you anymore. That's how it's supposed to be. Still, things shifted. Our calls got shorter, sometimes postponed, sometimes missed. She stopped asking my opinion, even on small things. When I did see her, she seemed polished, careful with her words, like she was measuring herself around me. I chalked it up to stress. Weddings do that to people. Michael and I met a few times. He was polite, firm handshake, eyes that scanned a room even when he was listening. He called me sir. Never Dad. That didn't bother me at first. Respect comes in different forms. But there were moments, small ones. He'd answer questions meant for Sarah. He'd steer conversations away from the past, like it embarrassed him. And once, when I joked about how Sarah used to sleep with the hallway light on, he smiled thinly and said, "People change." Sarah laughed too quickly after that. I noticed how she watched him before she spoke, like she was checking for approval she didn't need. How she'd go quiet if he interrupted her. How her shoulders tensed when money came up, even though I knew she wasn't struggling. None of it was enough to accuse, or confront, or even mention, but it was enough to make a man who's lived a few decades longer than he wanted to pay closer attention. Because when a relationship starts to feel rehearsed instead of lived in, that's when you realize something might already be slipping, quietly, politely, out of your hands. The first real doubt didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a silence that lasted just a second too long. I'd called Sarah one evening about a month before the wedding. Nothing urgent, just a routine check-in. I asked how planning was going, how she was holding up, whether she was eating right, the usual father stuff. She answered, but her voice sounded distant, like she was walking while talking. Then I asked a simple question. "So, sweetheart," I said, "what time do you want me there on the big day?" There it was. That pause. Not long enough to be rude, just long enough to be noticeable. I could hear her breathing. I could almost picture her eyes, shifting somewhere else in the room. "Well," she said carefully, "the ceremony starts at 4, but guests are supposed to arrive by 3:30. Guests. The word sat heavy in my ear. I waited. She didn't add anything. "All right," I said slowly. "And where do you want me seated?" Another pause. Shorter this time. Tighter. "There's assigned seating," she said, "but I'll send you the details." She didn't. A week passed. Then 2. I asked again, softer this time. She brushed it off, said things were hectic. Michael's parents were finalizing arrangements. The venue was strict. Lots of moving parts. I told myself to relax. But a man knows when he's being managed. The next clue came from someone who had no reason to lie to me. It was my sister, Janet. She'd been invited to the wedding on Linda's side, extended family stuff. She called me one afternoon, her voice cautious. "Mickle," she said, "I don't want to stir anything up, but did you get your invitation yet?" I told her no, that I didn't need one. She hesitated. "Because mine arrived last week," she said, "with seating details." I laughed it off, said maybe mine was coming separately. Parents get special treatment. But after we hung up, I sat there longer than I meant to. The house was quiet. The old clock in the kitchen ticked like it was counting something down. I checked the mail every day after that. Nothing. Then, about 2 weeks before the wedding, I finally received an envelope. Thick, cream-colored, fancy script. Inside wasn't an invitation. It was a note. Dad, we're so excited to celebrate with you. Due to limited seating and venue guidelines, we ask that you arrive shortly before the ceremony. An usher will help you. No seat number. No row. No mention of walking her down the aisle. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and set it on the table like it might bite me if I wasn't gentle. I didn't call her right away. I didn't want to sound emotional. I wanted to understand. I called Michael instead. We spoke politely. Weather, work, small talk. Then I asked casually, "So, am I walking Sarah down the aisle, or is that something you folks already planned?" Another pause. He cleared his throat. "We decided to keep it simple," he said. "The ceremony flows better that way." Flows better. I asked him what that meant. "Well," he said, choosing his words, "Sarah felt it might be awkward with everything." "What everything?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. He talked about modern weddings, about independence, about not wanting to single anyone out. I thanked him for his time and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed conversations, not just recent ones, years' worth, moments I'd brushed off, changes I'd excused. I asked myself hard questions and didn't like the answers that came back. I wasn't being pushed out loudly. I was being edged out quietly. And the quietest cut of all came a few days later, when I stopped by the venue to drop off a check I had offered toward the catering, only to be told, gently but firmly, that my contribution had already been handled by Michael's parents. That was when my instincts stopped whispering and started speaking clear. Something wasn't just off. Something was being hidden from me, and whatever it was big enough to make my own daughter step carefully around her own father. I didn't confront Sarah right away. That's not how I'm built. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I opened my mouth and risked saying something I couldn't take back. So I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret either. I paid attention. I reread that note she sent me until the words started sounding like excuses instead of explanations. Limited seating. Venue guidelines. Funny how those rules never seem to apply evenly. Funny how everyone else managed to get a place, a role, a clear position, and I got ambiguity wrapped in politeness. The real break came by accident. A week before the wedding, I stopped by Sarah's old college town for work. I had time to spare, so I figured I'd drop off a small gift I'd picked up for her. Something personal, not on a registry. I called ahead. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I drove by her apartment anyway. Her car was there. Lights on. I wasn't snooping. I parked across the street and waited, figuring she'd come out or notice me eventually. That's when I saw Michael's mother arrive. Then his father. Well-dressed. Purposeful. They went inside like they owned the place. I waited. An hour passed. The window was cracked open just enough. I wasn't trying to listen, but voices carry when you don't expect them to. Michael's mother spoke first. Sharp. Controlled. "We can't have confusion on the day," she said. "People will ask questions." Michael answered. Then Sarah. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I know," she said. "I just don't know how to handle him." Him. That was me. Michael's father said something I'll never forget. "Well, Sarah, you've done a good job keeping things presentable so far, but weddings bring out family. You need to decide what image you're putting forward." There was a long silence. Then Sarah said it. "He doesn't fit the image," she whispered. I felt that sentence land in my chest like a weight I wasn't ready for. Michael's mother sighed. Like this was all very reasonable. "We're not saying he can't attend," she said, "but maybe discreetly. In the back. No spotlight. No walking down aisles. People talk." Sarah didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She just said, "I don't want this to be a problem." That was it. That was the moment the last doubt drained out of me. I stayed there longer than I should have. Long enough to hear them discuss seating charts. Long enough to hear Michael say, "Most people think her father isn't really around." Long enough to hear Sarah let that assumption stand. They weren't just minimizing me. They were rewriting me. I drove home in silence. No radio. No phone calls. Just the hum of the road and the sound of my own breathing trying to stay steady. I thought about every overtime shift I'd worked, every scraped knee I'd cleaned, every time I'd swallowed my pride so my daughter could stand a little taller. And here I was, an inconvenience to be managed, a detail to be hidden so the picture stayed clean. That night, I finally opened the old filing cabinet in the garage, the one with tax records, insurance papers, work IDs, proof of a life lived straight and honest. I didn't know why I was looking at them. Maybe I needed to remind myself I existed. I didn't cry. Not then. What I felt was colder than that. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with polite voices and careful wording, and a daughter choosing comfort over truth. By morning, I understood exactly what had happened. Sarah hadn't just drifted away. She'd been convinced slowly, quietly, that her father was something to be embarrassed about, something to manage, something to place in the back row and hope nobody asked questions. And once you see that clearly, there's no unseeing it. The man I was yesterday would have swallowed it and shown up smiling anyway. But the man I became that morning knew something had to change, because if I let myself be erased without a word, I'd be teaching her that love is something you hide when it's inconvenient. I didn't lash out. I didn't call Sarah crying or furious. I didn't demand explanations or apologies. What I did instead was sit very still at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, and let the truth settle where denial used to live. There's a moment after betrayal when the pain peaks, and then something else takes over. Not anger, not sadness, clarity, the kind that strips things down to what they really are. Sarah wasn't cruel, not by nature. She was afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of disappointing the people who now paid for the wine, the venue, the image, afraid of being seen as complicated. And somewhere along the way, it became easier for her to shrink me than to stand up. I understood that part. I truly did. What I couldn't accept was being quietly erased while I smiled and pretended everything was fine. So I asked myself one hard question. If I showed up exactly the way they expected me to, clean, quiet, tucked away, what lesson would that teach her? That love should make itself small. That truth should stay out of sight. That respect is conditional. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My knees cracked. My back protested. Age does that. But my head was clear. I wasn't going to argue with seating charts or family politics. I wasn't going to force my way down an aisle where I clearly wasn't wanted. But I wasn't going to disappear either. The idea came to me slowly. Not like a spark, but like a weight shifting into place. I remembered something my own father once told me. If you want to see how people really feel about you, remove the symbols they're comfortable with. The suit, the title, the role. I thought about how people treat someone they believe has nothing to offer. No status, no leverage, no image to protect. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to show up as the father of the bride. I was going to show up as who they already believed I was. Invisible, disposable, an embarrassment. I spent the next few days planning quietly. No dramatics. No speeches rehearsed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, raw and unavoidable. I drove to a thrift store on the edge of town, bought an old coat that smelled faintly of dust and rain, scuffed boots a size too big, a knit cap with a loose thread. I let my beard grow out, didn't shave, didn't trim, didn't correct what time and work had already done. Every step felt strange, like I was stepping outside myself. At night, I lay awake wondering if I was going too far, wondering if this would hurt her more than it helped, wondering if I should just stay home and spare us both. But then I remembered her voice through that open window. He doesn't fit the image. And the doubt burned off like fog in sunlight. I wasn't doing this to punish her. I was doing it because sometimes people don't realize what they're ashamed of until it's standing right in front of them, undeniable and human. The night before the wedding, I folded the suit I'd planned to wear, pressed it carefully, hung it back in the closet. I wasn't throwing it away. I wasn't angry at it. I just didn't need it anymore. I placed the thrift store clothes on the chair instead. Looked at them for a long time. My reflection in the dark window didn't look like a victim or a villain. It looked like a man who had finally stopped asking for permission to exist. I didn't know exactly how it would play out. I didn't know what Sarah would say. I didn't know whether I'd walk away with closure or another wound. But I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow, the truth was going to sit in plain sight, and nobody would be able to pretend they didn't see it. I arrived early. Not early enough to be welcomed. Early enough to be ignored. The vineyard was already alive. Staff moving fast. Guests laughing easy. Glasses clinking like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. I took my place across the road, just like I told you. Sat down. Lowered my head. Let the moment breathe. People passed me without seeing me. Some wrinkled their noses. One woman clutched her purse tighter. A man muttered something about security. I didn't move. I waited. Then the music shifted. Guests stood. Chairs scraped. Phones lifted. And Sarah appeared. She looked beautiful. That part never changed. My chest tightened anyway. I stood up slowly, joints stiff, heart steady. When her eyes met mine, I saw it all happen in real time. Confusion, recognition, then panic. She froze. Just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. Her smile faltered. Her steps slowed. She looked to the side. Toward the ushers. Toward Michael. Toward his parents. They followed her gaze. Michael's mother's face tightened first. Not shock, calculation. Michael whispered something sharp to an usher. The usher started toward me. I didn't wait for him. I stepped forward. Not toward the aisle. Not toward the guests. Just closer. Enough to be unmistakable. Sarah, I said. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. A father's voice carries when it's real. The music stopped. You could feel the silence hit like a held breath across the whole vineyard. She turned fully then. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. Dad, she said. One word. Barely audible. Yes, I said. It's me. The usher hesitated. Looked back at Michael. At his parents. No one told him what to do. I stayed where I was. I won't walk the aisle, I said calmly. I won't sit in the front. I won't take attention that isn't welcome. Sarah swallowed hard. I just needed to see something, I continued. And now I have. Her eyes filled. Not with anger. With shame. People were whispering now. You couldn't stop that if you tried. Michael stepped forward, voice low but tight. This isn't appropriate, he said. I looked at him for the first time that day. Really looked. You're right, I said. What's inappropriate is pretending people don't exist when they make you uncomfortable. His mother stiffened. Sir, this is not the time. I know exactly what time it is, I said. Still calm. Still steady. It's the time when my daughter decides as she is. That did it. Sarah took a step toward me. Then another. Her veil shook as she reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve. The frayed one. The dirty one. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not loudly. Not performative. Real. I know, I said. That's why I came like this. Tears ran freely now. She didn't wipe them away. She turned to the crowd, then back to me. I didn't want to make things hard, she said. I know, I said again. But love isn't easy. It's honest. She looked at Michael, at his parents, then back at me. Come sit with me, she said. Louder this time. Michael opened his mouth. She raised her hand. He stopped. I shook my head gently. No, sweetheart. This is your day. I've already said what I needed to say. I took a step back. She nodded, tears falling onto the white of her dress. The officiant cleared his throat. The music restarted, softer now. I turned away. Not because I was dismissed, but because I was finally seen. And as I walked back toward that stone wall, shoulders lighter than they'd been in years, I heard something I never expected. Applause. Not thunderous, not dramatic, but real. And in that sound I knew, no matter how this marriage unfolded, my daughter would never forget the day she learned the cost of hiding love. I didn't stay for the reception. That surprises some people when they hear the story. But it felt right. The truth had already been spoken. Anything more would have turned it into theater, and that was never my aim. I walked back to my car slowly, sat behind the wheel for a long time before turning the key. My hands were steady. My chest felt tired, like it does after you carry something heavy for years, and finally set it down. I drove home in silence again, but this time it wasn't hollow. It was peaceful. Sarah called that night. Late. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Dad," she said, "I'm so sorry." I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to breathe. "I know," I said. "Tell me how you're feeling." She told me everything. How the pressure built slowly. How Michael's parents had opinions about appearances, about backgrounds, about what fit. How she convinced herself it was temporary. How she hated herself a little more each time she chose the easier path. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I believe you," I told her. And I meant it. We didn't fix everything that night. Real wounds don't work that way. But we spoke honestly, for the first time in a long while. No managing. No softening. Just truth, even when it stung. Michael called the next day. His apology was careful, polite. I thanked him and told him I hoped he'd learn something about courage. He didn't say much after that. The months that followed were different. Sarah reached out more. Not out of guilt, I could tell the difference, but out of choice. We met for coffee, walked through parks, talked about things beyond logistics and surface updates. She asked me once if I was angry. I told her no. Anger burns hot and fast. What I felt was resolve, the kind that teaches instead of destroys. I didn't dress that way to shame her. I dressed that way to show her what happens when we let others decide our worth. She's still married. They're figuring things out. That's their journey. I don't interfere. I don't advise unless asked. What changed is how she stands. She doesn't look over her shoulder before she speaks anymore. She doesn't minimize where she comes from. She introduces me proudly now. Not as an accessory, as her father. As for me, I went back to my quiet life. Same job, same house, same yellow bedroom down the hall. But something fundamental shifted. I no longer ask myself whether I belong in the rooms I enter. I know I do. Sometimes people recognize me when I'm out. They say they heard the story. They ask if it was worth it. I tell them this. Truth always costs something. But pretending costs more, and it keeps charging interest. I lost the illusion that love is always returned the way we give it. But I gained something better. Respect. From my daughter. From myself. And when I look back at that morning, the vineyard, the white chairs, the way the sun hit the dust on my boots, I don't feel shame. I feel relief. Because I didn't disappear quietly. I stood exactly where I was, and let the world decide what that was worth. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Here's what I learned the hard way, and maybe it'll help someone listening right now. The people who love you shouldn't need you to shrink to make them comfortable. And if they do, that's not love. That's fear wearing a polite face. I'm not proud of every choice I've made in life. I've stumbled. I've failed. I've trusted people who didn't deserve it. But I've never been ashamed of showing up honestly, even when it cost me. That day, I didn't expose my daughter. I exposed a lie she was living inside. And sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do isn't protect their child from discomfort. It's teach them how to stand when comfort asks them to sit down and stay quiet. If you're listening to this, and you feel yourself being pushed to the margins, if you're being asked to soften your truth so someone else can shine, hear me clearly. You don't need permission to exist fully. Show up as you are, because the right people won't ask you to hide, and the wrong ones don't get to decide your worth.